From a preliminary investigation of the existing geological and sedimentological data, I was surprised to find that there was no experimental explanation of the formation of strata. It had apparently been assumed that strata form in accordance with the principles of stratigraphy mentioned earlier, but there was no experimental data to confirm the assumption. Proof. If the assumption was proved to be incorrect, then the tool used by geologists for determining the chronology of fossils and rocks would be shown to be of little value. Having read their reports on sedimentology, I got in touch with the Colorado State University in North America. This contact led to an agreement being signed for a series of experiments to be conducted in their modern hydraulics laboratory at Fort Collins. This is a photo taken outside the laboratory of myself with Pierre Julien and his assistant. Pierre Julien is a lecturer in sedimentology at the university and was in charge of the experiments. They took place in large glass-walled tanks called flumes. Water, laden with sediment, was pumped into a flume, and the way it deposited could be observed and filmed from above and through the sides of the tank. Different-sized particles of sand were poured into water circulating in a flume. The movement of the water caused the particles to be sorted according to their size. Some of the fine and coarse particles were slowed down by either the roughness of the base of the flume or the sediments already deposited. They deposited, causing superposed laminae to form in the direction of the current. A reduction in current caused mainly larger particles to deposit on the previous laminae. Both the finer and coarser particles not contacting the laterally forming stratum continued to be transported by the current. An increase in the current velocity, again due to friction, caused laminae similar to the previous ones to form on top of the stratum of large particles.
There are 4 episodes of deposition in this example. Sedimentary rock would have been laid down during all stages of the flood. Tides and tsunamis, as well as local currents and drainage flows, would all have deposited, removed and redeposited material in a chaotic fashion, but particle sorting within sedimentary rock sequences should be and is the dominant theme. Where moving water meets an obstruction, incline or another body of water which causes it to slow down, something called crossbedding occurs. In this example, the laboratory tank has been inclined 2 degrees, which causes the sediment to deposit in a shape which produces layers at an angle of about 30 degrees to the horizontal. It is still prograding in the direction of current flow, but a distinctive shape is produced. Compare this distinctive shape with the crossbedding in the rock. They are identical, and it is therefore obvious that this body of rock was deposited in fast-flowing water. Slow and gradual processes over millions of years have nothing to do with crossbedding. Crossbedding on this scale, with 4 distinct episodes, each hundreds of feet high, can only be caused by massive water movement. Remember, these deposits do not represent the depth of the water flow, but only what has been deposited. It is likely that the depth of moving water that laid down these rocks was thousands of feet deep and moving at tremendous speed. Nothing like this happens today, and ideas of slow and gradual change are no use at all in explaining this feature. Only a global flood, as described in the book of Genesis, can explain this. Crossbedding is common and also inconvenient for flood deniers, so it is sometimes claimed to be the result of uplift, but the appearance of crossbedding is distinctive and cannot be reasonably denied. This very large mudflow or turbidite has been lithified in situ before any erosion has had an opportunity to take place. The contact boundaries between the 2 bodies are well preserved. This large and fearsome event has been frozen in time and can only be explained by a large-scale and singular catastrophe. Polystrate fossils are so called because they extend through many layers. If the rock layers had taken a long time to form, these tree trunks and reeds would have rotted away long before they were covered. The polystrate tree trunk on the right has no roots, evidence that the roots have been torn or ground off. These polystrate fossils were buried suddenly and violently. Often the term fossil record is used. This implies that the fossils provide evidence or an account of something, but of what? In our secular world, the term is usually heard in connection with the proposed evolution of life. The fossils are used to support the assertion of so-called simple life forms evolving to greater complexity through vast ages of time. This is a highly speculative and complicated theory with many problems. Is this the only way to view fossils, or does a global flood provide a straightforward understanding using processes we can observe today? What exactly is a fossil and how are they made? A fossil is any biological entity, such as a plant or animal, which has become permineralized. What this means is that the living tissue has been replaced with minerals. How does this happen? The item is buried in sediment, and the minerals in the sediment are absorbed by the tissue. As the sediment turns to rock, i.e. becomes lithified, so do the minerals which have been absorbed into the creature or plant. Fossils are normally well preserved with much fine detail. It is generally taught that fossils are produced by this process when they die of natural causes and are slowly buried. If this were true, then they would rot if they weren't eaten first. To become a fossil, they must be buried suddenly without oxygen, so they can't rot and where they can't be eaten. Fossilization, therefore, occurs as a result of sudden catastrophe. It may be through a global flood or a local landslide, but it must be quick. Fossilization is a product of the right conditions and not a product of time. Rapid permineralization is rare today, but can be observed where the conditions are right, such as the tourist attraction Mother Shipton's Cave in Yorkshire, Britain. Items can be placed in the mineral-rich waters, and a few months later they are fossilized. In the shop, fossilized teddy bears and items of clothing can be purchased. There is no need to bury the cat when it dies, or give it to the taxidermist. You can have it fossilized instead. First, a look at the evidence from the evolutionary perspective. You may have seen charts like this before. It is a typical representation of the fossil record. To the layperson, it would appear that there are many examples of the biology of the past distributed where they should be in the different rock strata to support the ideas of no-God evolution. But to begin with, this chart is not an honest representation of the proportions of the different kinds of fossils. More than 95% of all the fossils found are marine invertebrates, that is to say, shells and other creatures without bones. Most of the remainder are plants. Only 1/4% are creatures with bones at all. Yet you wouldn't think so looking at the diagram, where this 1/4% takes up a full half of the drawing. To put it another way, the mammals represented on the previous chart are only enough to take up a space the thickness of a line. Considering the evidence of catastrophe and violence in the rock deposits, it is no surprise to find that animals with hard shells make up 95% of fossils, and body parts make up most of the rest. Complete carcasses are rare. Where a general fossil order does exist, it can be interpreted in terms of mobility. In a flood, the more mobile and intelligent animals were the ones that managed to stay alive the longest, and so were buried last, whilst the least mobile and simplest life form was buried first. You might also think, looking at the chart, that were you to dig down through the rock layers in any part of the world, you would eventually come across the tertiary layer, the Cretaceous, the Jurassic, and so forth. This is not true. No continent on Earth has all 13 of these layers. On any one continent, only 3 or 4 will be found. The rest will be missing, and therefore the order suggested by the chart is theoretical and based on the presupposition of evolution, not observation. The layperson might also think that the rock layers are so named after something objective, like their composition, but this is not the case either. Different materials such as sandstone, limestone or clay can be found in the different rock classifications. Early geologists employed this classification simply in an effort to better describe rocks, not with any intention of assigning them an age. The classification was hijacked later by proponents of biological evolution and has now become academic orthodoxy. Incredulity and presumption inform the worldview of secular geology. Incredulity that the rocks can only be thousands of years old, and the presumption that evolution has actually taken place. It is the fossils found within the rock sequences that decide for them the issue of age. Rocks containing the simpler and smaller fossils are said to be older, and rocks containing the larger and more complicated fossils are said to be younger. It's as simple as that. The idea of the evolution of simple to complex life forms is the underpinning of the whole rock age classification scheme. But, as we have seen, moving water sorts sediment particles according to size, which then become rock sequences. It follows that each type of sediment will therefore have a uniform density and particular characteristics such as the ability to retain and support animal remains. Dead creatures suspended within the flood sediments will, like the sediment particles themselves, be sorted according to size and other factors, such as their mobility and where they lived when they died. The consistency of fossil remains within continuous rock sequences is a product of observable fluid mechanics and has nothing to do with speculative ideas about evolution. The rock here at Southstack, Anglesey, UK, is said to be Cambrian and Precambrian, some of the oldest rock in the world at 500 to 700 million years old. According to the fossil chart, it should be at the bottom of the rock layers, or geologic column, but it is at sea level instead. It also has the same material found in other rock types, such as Jurassic. There has always been controversy among flood deniers as to how rocks such as Cambrian come to be in this location, but their difficulties only arise because of their belief that these rocks are the oldest on Earth, instead of understanding them in the light of a single event, which would make all sedimentary rocks the same age. So if there is nothing distinctive about the material, and it is in the wrong place, why are they so sure that these rocks are the earliest rocks on Earth? Because of the fossils contained within them, it is said to be Cambrian because it contains only these small creatures, although as more fossils are found, the taxonomy of rock layers is being extended. Denying the evidence of catastrophe in the rocks means denying the flood and the water sorting which the fluid dynamics of such an event would produce. Men are then free to write the story of life on Earth how they like, which means without a creator. Mankind as god of the earth, the hero of millions of years of evolutionary struggle and development, owing nothing to a creator. This is history, not science, and it is no different to the man-centered pagan belief systems of the ancient Greeks and Egyptians, who themselves believed that life evolved from the mud and silt of the Nile River. The Egyptian empire is gone now, and the men who taught this, but God's word, the Bible, is still here.